Responses engine 5, engine 3, engine 1, ladder 3, ladder 2, rescue 1. We got full show. Division 1, you're on location, box 23, reporting smoke show on 727.
JobTlks podcast members do not represent the cities and towns they work for in their views and opinions. They are views and opinions that belong to us only. We are not here trying to be the experts or tell people how to do their job. Our goal with this show is simply to facilitate knowledge sharing. All right. Welcome back to another JobTlks podcast. This week we have a very special guest. But before we get into introductions, make sure you go to our YouTube channel, which hopefully you're already there if you're watching this. Subscribe. Don't forget to set your alerts so you know when we drop new episodes every Saturday at noon. Follow us on social media at JobTlks, JobTlks, on Instagram and Facebook. Also at JobTlks on YouTube. Or hit us up on our website, www.jobtalks.com, and leave us some feedback. Barry?
Cool. I'll take it over. So you might notice some changes today. It is true I'm sitting in a different chair. But one of my favorite people.
Did I kick you out of your chair?
No, well, there's very few people I'd give up that chair
I didn't
for.
realize this is what your seat over here.
He's kind of like, if you ever watch Big Bang Theory, he's kind of like Sheldon. He has this very specific spot he has to sit.
On the couch,
Well, there's a few people. So, we've invited a very special guest on the show today, a personal mentor of mine and Will's, and I believe John as well.
Absolutely.
Deputy Chief Fred Ikels from Cambridge. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and I think everybody's heart here, which is we're going to talk and dive deep into leadership development today. So we thought of no other person to bring on than Deputy Chief Fred Ikels. So
I appreciate you having me. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah.
This is great. This is
so
happy to have you.
Do you want to provide the audience just a little bit of background about yourself, who you are, and why you've become so passionate about leadership development?
Sure. I can do that. So let me know how deep you want me to go.
Just like your background in the fire service. A little bit about where you are today and why you've become kind of one of the guys, at least in our department. Yeah.
Well, all right. So I'm born and raised in Cambridge, and my father was on the fire department, so that's kind of how I became interested in all of that. Joined the Air Force out of high school. Was a firefighter in the Air Force. That was fantastic. And got hired in Cambridge in 2000, and sought promotion. Made lieutenant, made captain, and made deputy. And along the way, I was really interested in being a good officer, but I didn't quite understand the leadership thing quite yet. I had some good examples, but I had some poor examples, but I was really thirsty to learn about this, how to be good at this. And then I think what happened was I hit that book, Step Up and Lead by Frank Viscuso. And that he's a deputy chief out of Kearney, New Jersey. And I realized, hey, this is the stuff. This is the formula. This is what to do. And ever since then, I really committed to a path of leadership. And I think I became interested in leadership because I saw a lot of poor leadership, which I didn't appreciate that. I didn't like that, and I saw how it negatively affected the team. And I saw example of good leadership as well, and I could see the complete opposite on how great a team could be with the right leader in place. And I said, that's what I want to try to be. So, and that's what the fire service needs. We have a deficit of that.
Absolutely.
In fact, it's not the fire service only. There's a leadership deficit everywhere. There's a leadership deficit in business, in government, in the fire service. This is not just a issue for our industry. So, I kind of committed to learn about this and to become a student in leadership. And I decided to get my master's degree in leadership. I went to Norwich University to a program up there. That was a good program because I wanted to kind of round myself out. I couldn't just read read the books and practice it in the firehouse. I wanted to get some, a good academic background on it. And that was a great program. That helped me a lot. And then, we started teaching a program, a leadership development thing. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I know that both Barry and I were reading that book. I think it was the first book you recommended to us in the
Might have been Dichotomy of Leadership.
No, it was
Extreme Ownership.
Step Up and
No,
Lead.
Step Up and
Step
Lead.
Up and Lead. It was that one. Okay.
It was the first one.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you guys are interested in checking that book out, we're going to put it on our website, so you can find that under the resources tab. So if you're interested in checking that book out, but yeah, that was a great book.
Yeah,
Really good book.
It really is. It takes, that book, in my opinion, takes all the leadership stuff and really translates it into our industry, into the fire service. And he breaks it down very well. He's from a Kearney, New Jersey is like a mid-sized urban city in New Jersey. So, he's well situated to have a lot of experience.
Right.
Some different exposure.
Yeah. And, that book, I think, really hits home. And I think it's going to resonate with our people.
I think you hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of books about leadership, and generally, like, good leadership principles are kind of the same, but taking those principles and applying them to the fire service specifically is something that he did well.
Well, yes. And look, that's the beautiful thing about leadership. It's all the same stuff.
Right.
People that are leading teams at Microsoft, people that are leading teams in the military, in law enforcement, in the fire service, it's all the same stuff. It's just applied differently depending upon the environment, right? With leadership, there's three things, right? You have the leader, you have the follower, and you have the situation, okay? And where all those things intersect is your locus of leadership, right? Leadership is adaptive. You have to adapt it to the situation. So you're going to express whatever leadership is required for the moment, right? Leadership in the firehouse is going to look different than leadership on the fireground, right? That might look different than leadership in the boardroom. It might look different than leadership in your own family, right? Because we can be leaders at home too. That's important. It's all the same, just applied to the situation that you're in.
And I think that brings up a good point, because when we did that small ad hoc interview for my leadership class at school, we talked about, are the principles of leadership truly timeless, and do they translate, regardless of industry? And I think they really do. Like the principles of effective leadership translate from organization.
100%. 100%.
I think if you go back to the episode talking about trust, when you play that video on if you look around the room, you can find that any asshole, and then the same thing, if you look around the room, you can find that go-to person for anybody. And I think that is translatable to every type of business or job or homestead or whatever you want to call it.
That's the beauty of leadership, and that's what I find so inspiring, is that when you read about or learn about leadership stuff, you realize that these people are all doing the same thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So I find that especially when you I don't know how far down deep the rabbit hole you want to go.
No. Well,
but
all the way.
When you
Yeah, right.
Well, I find it incredibly inspiring when you read about these experiences from not only different industries, but different periods in history. When you go back 50 years, when you go back 100 years, when you go back 1,000 years, when you go to different countries, when you go to different continents, there's people in these situations, and they're doing the same thing. They're talking about the same situations. And do you know why? Because they're dealing with human beings. And human nature is inherently the same. General Grant in the Civil War was dealing with similar challenges that Jocko Willink was probably dealing with his SEAL team. Or, generals during World War II in Russia, or whatever. You're trying to bring a team together to accomplish an objective. Right? So you have to build trust. You have to build relationships. It's really all comes together to be the same stuff.
Right.
One of the reoccurring themes that we keep talking about is, and we keep talking about this generational gap, right? And we're trying to really isolate it so we can solve this problem, right? And so, and you talk about education and building an education and really getting a good academic background to this. Coming from the business world before I got in the fire service, and I took some classes in college. I didn't finish college, but what I came out and what I see now and what you see with all these competitive industries is that you get these people coming out of school and you talk about the human aspect and the human nature, right? We're almost turning out robots in this education system where it's like you go in, you crunch these numbers, and you solve the ultimate solution to the problem is making more money for some, for some of these businesses. It's like, where can I go in and cut this and cut that and make myself look good in this leadership position or this management position and things like that. And so I think part of this generational gap that we've gotten into is the fact that we have turned out some robots in a sense where we don't have people with this real world life experience that, we're a bunch of people. We're a bunch of humans, and we have to be treated as such and treat as such to get over these obstacles and these hurdles.
Well, look, so that's interesting, right? But I reject wholeheartedly the whole generational gap thing.
Okay.
If you're I'm not rejecting what you're saying.
No, I know you're not.
But a lot of people, I
you.
think, talk about this millennial thing,
right?
Or this Generation Z thing, right? Well, guess what? If you're failing to connect with these people, you're failing as a leader. When you say a generational gap, a millennial thing, you're blaming, right? I feel like that's blaming them. Look, they're not like us.
Right.
They don't know how to work equipment like we did.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right, well, teach them.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Bring them in, build some trust.
Right.
Make an effort to get to know them and show them. Take these people. I mean, look what this generation has done in the military in Iraq and Afghanistan. They went out and they've been getting after it, and I respect them for it. They're capable. They just need leaders to bring them together and show them the way.
Right.
And that's our responsibility. Like, we need to do that. If there's a guy on the rig that doesn't know how to start a saw because he's never been shown, well, where are you? Teach him.
Right.
I'm saying you collectively, not like you specifically.
I understand.
No, I think you, John. You're honestly.
Yeah, seriously.
I mean, show them how to
Judging
drive
by
a
your
truck.
piece of crap.
I've seen guys come on the job. They've never really driven a large vehicle before.
Right.
All right. Well, got it.
Get in the seat.
Get in the seat. Let's go. Let's train you up.
Yeah.
We had a couple things. One is people forget, like, the millennial generation is the generation that fought the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's the age. That's the age group.
Yes. Yes.
Two, what you said, like, managers versus leaders. I know we've had that conversation. There's a very big difference in someone who is a manager and someone who is a leader. And one of the things, like, when you say about getting into the truck, like, drive the truck, Barry and I both worked for a lieutenant, and one of the things he did that I thought was great was, as we were approaching our mark where we were able to take the radio, which is, I don't know, different departments call it different things. So being an acting officer, being an acting lieutenant on the truck, is he actually had us ride. He rode in the back and had, like, one day I was driving and Barry was acting as a lieutenant. Another day Barry was driving, I was acting as a lieutenant, and he sat in the back and guided, but let us actually, like, get that experience and, like, put that experience on us. And the day I did it, we actually had a pretty eventful day.
Yeah.
But that's a guy being a good leader right there.
Exactly.
He's trying to prepare you for what's coming your way.
And I think a lot of people that could be leaders or are in positions to be leaders don't bring up the people behind them because they are afraid of becoming irrelevant or being passed over on promotions, and instead, not necessarily hold people back, but don't prepare people. So those people that you find that actually will bring you up with them or even ahead of them or whatever the case is, those are special people.
That's an imperative for us to train our people to take the next step up the chain if they need to. Who knows who's going to be absent? Who knows who's going to be out or injured or down?
Right.
The next guy in line needs to be able to step up and take charge at any moment.
Right.
At any moment.
And that's the key of, like, leadership development is your role as an effective leader is to build capable leaders that are capable to replace you. But so we have a video here of a somewhat notable leader
Never heard of him.
that has offered a lot of leadership lessons. So this is Jim Mattis, former Secretary of Defense and also 4-star General from the Marine Corps, that kind of came up in his leadership realm during the Iraq and Afghanistan campaign, where he really rose to notoriety for some of his leadership philosophies. So I'm going to play a video here that we'll discuss.
True name, Mad Dog.
What is the one leadership lesson you learned as a general grade officer that you would wish you have known your whole career? You learn all the way through Jonathan, at each rank, you're learning more. And if there was one lesson that came more and more into focus over the years, it was one I learned by watching similar sized units. Like, for example, I watched dozens of platoons go through certain ranges, or I saw companies, dozens of companies in fights. I always wondered what made one unit better than another. They were all well trained. They all came through the boot camp. All of them had been recruited from America, and they were quality young men. So what made them different? It was the junior leadership, the junior NCOs, the junior officers whose coaching, whose animating spirits brought out the best in their troops, who had admired leadership. We all know that earning the trust and respect of your subordinates is critical. You simply have to earn that trust. You have to earn that respect. You have to earn that every day, because when it's all over and done with, you're not going to win any fights as a leader. Your troops are going to win those fights. But there was another word I learned to prioritize as I evaluated units, and that word was affection. It's not popularity, with all the favoritism that comes with trying to be a popular person as a leader. That's a road to failure. But affection that you create in a unit, an affection so strong that the troops will stick by one another, they'll carry out the mission even in peril. And I bring this one up because I believe that that kind of affection brings out self-discipline, where people don't want to let down the unit. And I think that if there is one lesson I learned along the way, that the more you can build that kind of affection in a unit, when the going gets tough, when people are getting shot down around you, it'll pull together, it'll pull through. And it'll be a lot smoother organization. It'll move more rapidly against the enemy, more fluidly against the enemy, and it will, generally speaking, have fewer disciplinary problems in garrison, whether it be DUIs, sexual harassment, or all that stuff that you see some jerks do. And on the other hand, when you're in combat, you'll find that they really play hell with the enemy.
All right, so that's the gist of it. And I really the point that I really wanted to bring up was empowering junior leaders, and how do we build a culture in the fire service that really empowers those junior leaders, and we do that through leadership development, which is I know something that's all near and dear to our heart. So I'm going to catch up here. So I'll read this brief quote, and I think that kind of opens up the conversation. So it says, when one thinks of the qualities of an effective leader, oftentimes visible character traits such as boldness, confidence, and a sense of calm in the face of adversity are referenced. And while these leadership traits are valued and oftentimes necessary in today's competitive industries, it's necessary to develop a deeper understanding of the fundamentals of effective leadership, what I've grown to call the intangibles of leadership. At its core, leadership is a privilege afforded to those who have demonstrated they are trustworthy enough to carry the responsibility for the safety, development, and success of their peers and subordinates. It's a privilege and a responsibility that must be continuously nurtured and invested in order for the team to succeed, regardless of the mission. The intangibles of leadership are not born of the visible qualities, but of the contrary. They are born of failure and willingness to try again, to humble oneself and leverage the capabilities of the team to maximize performance, and the realization that the hallmark of a truly effective leader is the ability to inspire and to develop those in your charge into leaders themselves. Some guy named Barry wrote that.
Wasn't it enough that we gave you a shout out
Yeah.
a few episodes ago, and now you have to quote yourself?
Yeah. But so I wrote that for school. But the thing that I have found, my leadership experience is very much formed from my time in the Army, being a leader in the Army. But I think is building, like, you have to have the capacity to inspire and the capacity to develop young leaders. So when you leave the organization, the biggest hallmark and the biggest, legacy you can leave is building capable and confident leaders to take your place. And I think that's the biggest thing that will speak of you when you're gone.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Well, when it's one thing to express good leadership, right? We want to do that, but great leaders create other leaders, because
Yep.
like you said, it perpetuates the leadership cycle, it becomes a force multiplier. And that matters. I mean, there was a lot to unpack there. You showed a video and read that whole thing there. There's a lot to unpack there. And the one thing that my takeaway is trust. Leadership, if it comes down to one thing, it's trust.
Yep.
Trust is the coin of the realm. 100%. So if leaders can remember one thing, it's when you come in every day, into the firehouse every day, just keep in mind your job is to build trust. Because I think a lot of people, they might read and learn and listen to leadership stuff, and it might sound like a lot. Just come in and do whatever it takes to build trust. You know what those things are. Every action you take, everything that you say, is this thing that I'm doing right now building trust? Is talking about the guy in the other shift that I don't like building trust? It's not. Don't do that. You only dishonor yourself when you do stuff like that. And who's not gotten caught up in gossip? Like, I've gotten caught up in gossip myself.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I don't profess to be the perfect leader. I don't profess to be an expert. But what I am is a guy that has recognized the importance of leadership. And so I do the best that I can to learn about it. I do the best that I can to express it. I've had successes and failures, because I'm certainly not perfect here. But I do recognize it as important, and that's why I want to talk about it so much and try to encourage others to learn about it like I'm trying to learn about it, because it's benefited me, and I've seen it benefit other people. And I've seen other people fail because I think because they didn't know. I don't think anybody has mentored. Maybe some folks lacked mentorship or lacked guidance or lacked development, and I've seen people make real leadership failures, and they just didn't know.
So a question I guess I have for you with that is, number one is I appreciate the humility. I think for me, I've mentioned humility on multiple episodes when we talk about culture stuff, because I think for me it's like one of the core backgrounds of a good person,
absolutely, yeah.
Good leader, good whatever.
Yeah.
But do you think, like with that statement, that leadership is something innate or something created?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for that. That's a spectrum. Some people are born with more innate traits. Some people are born with less innate leadership traits. But leaders are inherently developed. Okay? You're not just, however you're made or born, that's not it. It's, do you choose to commit yourself and to develop? And nobody has to develop into a Jim Mattis. I think we just want to be the best versions of ourselves that we can, and take it or leave it. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself. And, am I ever going to get to Jim Mattis level? Probably not. But I'm going to try to do the best that I can. And I think that if everybody can adopt that, hey, I'm just going to do the best that I can. But I would also encourage people to not underestimate yourselves. You're probably capable of way more than you think you are. So push yourself further.
I think you just have to build people who care, and I think I read the kind of interview that you did with Barry, and I'm pretty sure it was in that you said
the audio.
Yeah, that you have to genuinely care about everybody.
Absolutely.
That's under your command or in your shift, or even if you're a lower enlisted, you have to generally care about all the people above you as well to be effective in that leadership.
So yes, and that's sometimes not easy. Leadership has to be authentic. If it's not authentic, people can smell it. If you're faking it, people can sense that. People are not stupid. Even our youngest firefighters, they're not stupid. Don't try and hoodwink them. Have you ever had a person in a leadership position ask you about something about you that felt inauthentic? I remember a person in a position of leadership would often, hey, how are the kids? How are the kids doing? But it did not feel authentic at all. I'm like, this guy doesn't even know how many kids I have. He doesn't know their
It's
names.
just an obligatory.
Right.
It's just an obligatory thing to look nice. And in a way, I appreciated it because I didn't think he was a bad guy. I just felt like maybe it wasn't as authentic as it could be, and that's why it's important to, when you're connecting with people and you're building those relationships and you're building trust, that it's authentic. And guess what? There's going to be people that you have bad chemistry with. Okay? Now, I changed my phraseology there. I don't say there's people I don't like. I don't like to do that because that's like a negative thing.
Right.
But I think it's real, right? There's people that you don't like and there's people that don't like you. That's a natural thing. So I accept that in the world. But I prefer to say there's people that I have bad chemistry with. Because when I say I don't like somebody, that's just too negative.
Feels like a choice.
Yeah, it feels like a choice. That's right. Exactly. It feels like a choice. So there's people that you have bad chemistry with. But guess what? If they're on your team, you still have a responsibility.
You have to find a way to connect.
To lead them. And I failed at that a couple of times, right? And so if my leadership has to be authentic, that I authentically want to lead these people, whether I have good or bad chemistry with them, so it's my responsibility to find a way to connect with them. It's my responsibility. I can't say, Joe Blow over there really stinks.
Well,
not doing it.
Unless it's Will.
Well, I'm not,
So honesty is also a good policy.
Yeah, honesty is a good policy.
Some people you just can't develop.
You got to be careful with that too. That can burn you.
That is true.
You have to use judgment. That got me pretty good a couple of times. I thought speaking truth to power would be respected, and it burned me pretty good in the past.
Typically, among good leaders, it's respected.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
I think if you're, this is my personal opinion, if you're a good leader and you really do care, and somebody is honest with you about something that maybe isn't something you're doing well or right or whatever the case is, and you actually care, you don't have to have the same opinion. Right. You might say, well, my view of this in this position is different, but I can still respect that you care enough to come to me and talk to me about it. You
have to frame it in a way that values it. I appreciate your feedback. I'll take that into consideration instead of immediately shutting someone off.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I definitely agree with you, but in adopting ownership of myself and my actions, I had an experience in the Air National Guard where I think I expected it to be a little more similar to my active duty experience, and it wasn't. So I think I had a hard time adapting, and I copped a negative attitude. That's my failure. For a while, I blamed them for not being like my active duty unit. Well, that was stupid. Why? And then that's where I spoke truth to power. And I complained, and I said, they're going to respect that I'm telling them how I feel in an honest way. But I didn't do it the right way.
Tact is definitely important if you're going to be.
Tact is important. And so that was my failure. So I own my failure. What could I have done in that situation? I can't control the situation. That's out of my control. Maybe this unit had a different culture than my last unit. Okay, well, tough. Deal with it. What can I do here? How can I help? How can I be a good team member? Maybe I should have went to my leaders in that organization and said, hey, how can I be a good team member here? How can I contribute? What do you need from me? I didn't do that.
Right.
I just copped a negative attitude because it wasn't what I wanted. So that was my failure all day long.
And that's the difference between complaining and bringing a complaint with a potential solution as well.
Because it closes the door to any real dialogue.
Yeah. Correct. We have so many problem finders. We need problem solvers.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you hear people all the time talk about this problem, that problem, the other problem, and it's cool.
Solve it.
Yeah.
Solve it.
Right.
What are you going to do to fix that?
Right.
And that sometimes can make people think a little bit.
I like Barry describes his current job in the Army, and I like the description for leadership as well, and it's navigating the human terrain.
Yeah,
that's the biggest part. So I was going to bring that up. That's what to me, being an effective leader. There's so many different personality styles. People respond differently in different ways to different things, even within the Army, which is generally considered a rigid organization. To where I'm understanding now, there's even a shift in the way that people respond to feedback and respond to development. Where I personally respond really well to if we were on the fire ground and you're this is fucked up, you better unfuck yourself right now.
Yep.
And I'd be okay, got it, tracking, understood. But some people don't respond well to that.
Correct.
So I think the one of the biggest things with leadership is understanding that you need to take a different leadership approach with the individuals that are in front of you, taking the time to get to know that individual and how they can, what is the best way to approach them and to navigate that human terrain.
Yeah, absolutely. See, that's the thing is building trust and building relationships is about getting to know people, right? And that's where the authentic part comes in. What makes them tick? You have to find out. Everybody's a little different. You have to find out what makes them tick. Why is this guy here? Why did this guy join this unit or this department or this profession? Is it because he wants to be the best? Or is it because, hey, he just needed a job, or somewhere in between? And if you can find that out, you'll understand when they do things and when they take actions, you'll understand it and it won't confuse you, and you'll know how to interact with them more effectively. I had one of the guys that I didn't have great chemistry with in the past, and I, probably didn't lead him as well as I should have. Another leader in the organization ended up getting this person and then mentioned, hey, this guy is not what you think. He's just not interested. He's interested in X and Y. And I think it was sports or something. I forget which sport specifically. But you talk to him about that, and he starts opening up, and he knows all this stuff, and he's all interested.
Right.
Okay, well, you can use that to build a relationship with him and then maybe get the best out of him. You can't make everybody into the highest performer you've ever seen. Your responsibility as a leader is to get the most out of them that you can. It's to take the team that you have and to get the most out of them that you can. And you're going to get a lot more out of some people than others. Okay, well,
Right.
we're not magicians here. We're just trying to get the best out of them.
Right.
That's why I think leadership teams are important, because, like you said, people might not respond well to your style of leadership. They might respond well to another person's style of
Yeah.
leadership. So when I think of that, I can think of like a company commander in the first sergeant in the Army, but
Yep.
I also can think of like when a division chief selects his aide.
Yep.
Right. So you and Tommy, for example, balance each other out. You have different leadership styles, but together you create a very effective team.
Yep.
And people might respond well to one or the other. So that's why I think something like
That's
that.
a,
is
that's a
important.
really good. That's a really good.
You
point.
have to pick people on your team that aren't always that obviously how do I want to say that? You want to pick people on your team that aren't afraid to challenge you. You want people on your team that are going to be truthful with you. You want people on your team. You want a diverse team. You want people that are going to look at things differently, because maybe I'm looking at it from this angle, but this guy over here is looking at it from a different angle.
Right.
I'm going to find more solutions and have more options available to me if I can look at this thing from multiple angles.
Right.
So that's good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
But you have to have the same goal and mission. So your views on things might be differently, but you have to have the same goal and mission, which is to be
Yes.
either a good leader or. I also like that you said that you have to be, not have to, but you might be a different leader in the firehouse versus the fire ground.
Yes.
Like that's a big difference, culture, and that's kind of the podcast culture versus tactics. And like on
Yes.
the fire ground, your leadership style might be different.
right.
And you might have people on your team that vary in your views, but the ultimate goal, there is to rescue or put the fire out or whatever the case may be. So
Yeah.
having the different personalities and stuff with the same goal, I think, makes a really good
Right.
leadership team. As long as your goal is for good, I guess.
Yeah, we all must be unified by the mission.
Right.
And that has to be clear. There can be no confusion about our organizational mission.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, I've asked you in the past, like, oh, what are the traits of an effective leader? Like, you
Yeah.
know, people like want the definition. What is the traits of an effective leader? So I'll pull this up during the episode, but this wheel right here is actually from the Army Leadership Manual.
Yeah.
And we talk about even like going back to Simon Sinek, where he's like competency versus trust.
Yep.
Yep.
So this is the actual rating scheme for how leaders in the Army are rated.
Yep.
And it's separated into two very distinct categories.
Mm-hmm.
Competency as a leader and your attributes as a leader. So these are literally on your non-commissioned officer evaluation report. This is
Yeah.
what you're evaluated on.
Yeah.
So your character, right? Your Army values,
Spec Corps Mafia for life, baby.
Well, we also need specialists, but your presence, right? Do you have military bearing? Are you confident? Do you demonstrate resiliency? But also things we talk about, your intellect, right? Do you demonstrate mental agility? Do you have good judgment, innovation? One of the most important things, do you have good interpersonal tact?
Right.
And that goes up and down the train, right? So those are your attributes as a leader. And then are you demonstrating not only the attributes reflective of a leader, are you a competent one, right? And the biggest things under leads, right? Develops others, builds trust,
Right.
leads by example and communicates. Develops, right? Creates a positive working environment, prepares self and develops others.
Yep.
And leads and develops are the two biggest blocks that you're rated on in the Army, right? Do you demonstrate the competency and ability to lead, but can you also develop others to do the same?
The best part of that wheel is that not really one thing on there is actually the job. Like, not a single thing on there is, can you build a bridge or can you do this? It's, can you lead? Do you have the attributes to lead and the competencies to lead?
Well,
we can
because-
teach the skills.
That's right. Leadership is the most important thing, okay? It's the most important thing. So if you get the leadership right, you're going to land on your feet, because a leader knows he also has to be a good manager. A leader knows he has to be proficient in his tactics and the operational level. You know, the leader knows these things, right? You can be good at tactics, but not good at leadership. But if you're good at leadership, you're going to know that you're responsible for knowing this other stuff too.
Right.
You know, that matters. And what I like there and what we can learn from that is that this stuff is in writing for the Army, okay? You know, how do we expect to get good leadership out of our company officers in the fire service if we're not putting these things in writing for our people? You know, that matters. You know, when an officer gets promoted and he gets put into a position of leadership at wherever he is, and it's not just at the company level, you can be in a position of leadership in an office setting or something like that. Where are we putting this as a guide so they know what the expectation is and what we want from them? The Army is laying that out, you know, and I think that the fire service should do a better job doing that for our people and our officers as well.
And sorry.
I was going to say, I think so too. And I think one of the things that we battle in the fire service for doing stuff like that is that Mattis said it, is you battle the popularity versus the affection. And so what we battle a lot in the fire service that I think and I see is we battle that too cool for school attitude. We battle that like attitude that people are embarrassed to like be into the job, or, you know, think that because, you know, they've done it 100 years this way that we don't need to do this stuff. And, you know, how do people get along, you know, without this stuff beforehand? And it's not that we didn't, it's just that we might be able to improve, and that's...
Well, I mean, so you have a good point there, but I think that comes from culture, right? Culture is everything, and, you know, we need to create the culture we want to give us the product that we want. So, and that's a huge thing to try and change. Culture change is enormous.
That's driven by leadership.
Yeah,
it is. It's driven by leadership.
And I feel like sometimes when you talk about this stuff, like understanding people's personalities, what makes them tick, like changing the culture to drive us in a certain direction, sometimes sounds like, you know, people are like, well, that sounds like you're manipulating people. And it's not manipulation. It's just actually understanding somebody and caring and having that like ultimate goal of bringing people to influence.
It is a little bit of manipulation, but to positive ends. Right. Because you can manipulate people to negative ends. That's still leadership. There's bad leadership, you know. Street gangs have leadership.
Yeah.
Very strong leadership.
Strong leadership, yeah.
That's a good
you know,
point.
and you know, biker gangs, or what have you, have leadership. You know, there's all kinds of places that have leadership to maybe negative ends.
I'm just thinking of the dark version of Fred Ikels. This is like
Bizarro Fred Ikels.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention the former guy's name, but the guy who's slipping cuffs with butts in his mouth in the back of police cars in his younger days.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna be a positive leader, you need to know the negative side of leadership as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's important and that matters.
I think you also have to be, as an effective leader, you have to be like an honest and decent human, because if you learn leadership and you learn how to, I don't like using the word manipulate because I feel like it has a negative context, but if you learn how to influence people based on like what makes them tick and what they care about, and you're not an honest and good person, you can do bad things with that. And so I think I also think that that's where you start. It becomes very obvious when somebody's authentic and not authentic.
Yes.
And I think one of the other things that I wanted to bring up that I think is important that you and I have talked about at length, and you and I think all of us have talked about.
I actually don't talk to Barry outside of here.
Yeah, at work. I believe it was at work. But I think in order to be a good leader, you need perspective outside your own organization.
Yeah.
So you talked about, you know, going to Norwich, right, to kind of broaden your horizons. But I think some of the most capable leaders, you know, like I said, my leadership experience is limited and informed by my view in the Army. But I think being in the Army and traveling around the world and experiencing different leadership styles, both civilian and military, and now
Yep.
being in a fire service organization, I think it's really important, because if your leadership philosophy and perspective is isolated to one organization, I don't think that it helps inform your future leadership development style very well.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
something that Mattis talks about.
Yeah.
He says, if you haven't read, I think it was thousands of books.
3,000.
3,000. Oh, I'm a little
Yeah,
far
I'm
off.
not-
You're
yeah, I'm a
functionally
little
illiterate
I'm a little
Functionally
behind.
if you haven't read 3,000 books
Wow.
per General Mattis. So I am functionally
I
illiterate.
resemble
I think
that
we all-
remark.
Absolutely.
I think we all are. But he uses that, obviously he's isolated, he was isolated within his experience in the Marine Corps as a general officer,
Yeah.
but he was using literature and historical experiences to broaden his perspective.
Yes. Yes.
I also think that within the organization you can have different experiences. So one thing in the military is, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but almost always the best officers were former enlisted. And it was just a completely different view within the same organization that gave them a different perspective, and I feel like made them more effective and better leaders.
Former specialists.
You you might have had a different experience than I did there. In the Air Force, the entire fire department is enlisted, so we didn't deal with officers.
That's what's interesting about that.
We talked the whole
Yeah.
rank structure absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah, your chief of department is an E9
Yeah, that's
or E8 promotable to E9. So
Right.
we just our officers were down at the squadron level, and we just didn't interact with officers very much.
yeah.
And
Very different.
So
we
for,
did fine. We
Yeah.
did fine.
So for my experience, being infantry, the best, or some, not always, but
Yeah.
some of the best
Yeah.
officers I interacted with that were able to like motivate you on the battlefield and off the battlefield,
Yep.
and like when bodies are dropping,
Yep.
are people who had the experience that you had.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the thing about the military is that being an officer, is you don't really ever have the enlisted experience. So I think that made a big difference, and I think in any organization, I think it's like the fire services is you kind of innately have that because you have to start as a private. You can't come
Yeah.
in and just
Yeah.
become a captain or a lieutenant or something like that with your education,
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's very interesting that culture, because it's polar opposite of my experience is also unique, and that like I interact with like majors and lieutenant colonels
Yeah.
like regularly.
Yeah.
But yeah, ours is very officer heavy. So I don't even think like within the Army that's all enlisted centric. I don't know.
Nowhere else. I mean,
Yeah.
you obviously have the majority, enlisted, but
But we had some good NCOs. I mean, we really
Well, that's-
did. I mean,
that's
we
the
were well.
backbone.
We were. I have to say that in my experience, we were pretty well led. I mean, we had some good NCOs, and coming into the fire service, right? That was my only example of leadership when I came into the fire service, was the NCOs that I had in the Air Force. And I have to say that what surprised me about them as leaders was that leadership wasn't really a part of the conversation for us junior enlisted guys, E2s, E3s, and stuff like that. But what those E5s did, our supervisors, were they actually took personal interest in our development. They actually cared. I actually felt like they cared because they did. I had like Sergeant Wright and Sergeant Cochran. They were like first two supervisors. And my God, they would spend a lot of time with me, teaching me and mentoring me and making sure I didn't get in trouble off duty. They told me,
Right.
if you are at a bar, because I was stationed overseas in Germany, if you're at a bar and you're drinking and you don't think you can drive or you can't get a ride home, call me.
Yeah.
I don't want you getting a DUI, because the friggin' guy cared about me.
Right.
And I didn't have to use that, but I knew he was there if I needed. And so guess what? That builds immense amounts of trust. So guess what? When he needs me to do something in the firehouse, I'm on it.
Right.
Unquestionable. Because this guy cares about me. I now trust in him. That creates good unit cohesion.
right.
And that's that authenticity. So like, John, when you say about like your first lieutenant, that you were like, I would run through a wall for this man.
Yeah. From my first day in to, he got promoted. He's working days now, but I mean, every step along the way, he made sure he checked in to make sure I was,
Yeah.
on board, doing the right thing, and then he's also just one of those guys around the firehouse that was good at bullshitting. He's probably one of the best leaders that we have. I mean, he's one of the guys that he doesn't have a bad thing to say about anybody, and nor does anybody have a bad thing to say about him. So he's just like, he's that guy who, when you talk about chemistry, Chief, right? It's just everybody has good chemistry with Buddy. I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about him.
That's again
good.
the Mattis affection, versus popularity. Like you build an affection for these people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
leaders ought not to care about being popular,
Right.
right? You're not driven by that. But when you care for people and you create, actually love is a part of leadership, and that's an odd thing to say, but look into it, because
I knew it.
when you create strong levels of trust and deep levels of affection within the team, like leadership is based on these deep levels of affection. Have you ever been out
I agree.
with a group of fire guys, and you'll see a few teams of guys that are tight,
Right.
and they'll hug each other and say, "Hey, I love you, buddy."
Yep.
Yeah.
I've
Nick?
seen it. I've done it.
See,
Barry forces it upon me.
And it's
I'm just a hugger, man.
but when guys feel like that about each other, they're not going to let each other down.
Correct.
Right.
They're doing the job for the guy next to them, and that matters, because when
Right.
things get tough, and things can get very tough in our job, and things can get dark in our job, when things start to break down, teams that don't have trust, they're going to be the first to break down. But teams that have deep affection for each other are going to hold.
Yeah, I agree.
They're going to hold, and that's the place that we want to get to. And some teams have it, and some teams don't. But again, I would like to see the fire service, do a better job industry wide of creating conditions like that.
Go ahead.
So I was gonna say I 100% agree, and I also think there's something to be said for collective suffering that bonds the team together. I think that like even, but not even like, collective suffering at the hands of bad leadership, which I have an example of in building trust and confidence.
Yep.
But I think like going through like really tough times as a team is necessary to really like almost forge like the actual the bond.
Experiences build relationships.
Right.
Why am I still years later, right? I am still friendly with guys that I was stationed with overseas in the 1990s. Why? Because I went through an experience with them. We were all far away from home.
Shared experience.
Yep.
It's a shared experience. I think that's what brings, and I've never been in combat, but from what I understand, that's one of the things that makes these guys so tight, is because that's an extreme experience for people. And so it creates extreme bonds. Look at the fire service. How does that translate to us? Your busiest firehouses, typically, right? Your busiest
here we go.
firehouses tend to have the highest level of morale, because they're going through it together. They're doing 17 calls a shift together.
Is this about Engine 2?
It's not, no.
Look at L.A. Skid Row, the busiest firehouse in the country, hands down, and those guys are prideful.
Yeah.
And they love each other, and
That's
they
right.
are there doing the
Don't
job.
transfer me out of here.
Yeah.
This is where I belong. This is me.
Yeah.
That's that
And-
shared identity.
Embracing the
identity.
suck.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Embrace the suck. That's
What's-
that's a good one.
What's interesting about the shared experiences that build those like real big bonds, like
Yeah.
talking about combat, is like
Yeah.
you can even end up really, and I will say, disliking people after those experiences, because they're a very certain person when you're in those experiences, and they're a very different person outside of them.
Yeah.
And you still will always have like an affection and love for that person. Like you can literally hate who they are, and then still like you're still going to defend them to the
Isn't
death.
that a funny thing? Because there's some guys that I was in the military with that I didn't really have great chemistry with, but I still have this odd affection for them.
Exactly. There's several that I was
It's a weird
in the
thing.
military with that, like, you ask me, I'm like, oh God. But then if you're like, yeah, that guy sucks, I'd be like, listen.
Yeah, he's
You know,
one
like,
of, look, he's one of us.
Yeah.
So
it's like growing up. It's like your best friend's like little brother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you slap
He's
him
like-
around.
He's a pain, but
Yeah.
like,
Right.
Yeah.
but nobody better mess
No
with
one
him.
else talks shit about this
But
kid.
if somebody else
Right.
did it,
Yeah. Hey, only us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
That's my punching bag.
Yeah.
That's the thing. you know?
So, talking and building trust and confidence and the perils of not building trust and confidence, I'm going to show you another short clip. It's a humorous clip, but I think it speaks well to the perils of ineffective leadership, and also kind of speaks to that collective suffering. So
is it one of my favorite movies?
It is. It is. So I'm
What's
gonna
that,
throw
Step
up
Brothers?
there. Throw that up there.
No.
So I'll pull this up on YouTube. So this part will be edited out, obviously. So
Before we do that, since you're pulling it up anyway, I do have a question for you, Chief.
All right.
Um,
Is this a question you want to wait for the?
I I think it goes to what you were just saying.
Yep, bring it.
So when you talk about building that trust
Yep.
and like doing the right thing,
Yep.
especially when you're in a leadership position where you're not the top of the leadership chain,
Yep.
and you have to enforce things or policies that maybe you don't deal with or that you don't agree with. I guess my answer is like, how do you implement like leadership and help enforce things that you might not actually even agree with yourself because it's good for the collective or because it's the job requires it?
Well, that's a great question. And that's a great question because I think everybody at some point is going to experience that, right? So how do you balance that dichotomy, right? How do you balance your loyalty to the chain of command versus the loyalty to your troops? And I'm not fully on board with this thing, but I'm supposed to implement it. What am I going to do?
Right.
That's an opportunity. Okay, that's an opportunity. You have to remember that your troops are watching you all the time. And your leaders, the people above you, are watching you all the time. They're watching how you interact with each scenario, okay? And that can put a lot of pressure on people.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how are you going to handle that? I think the first thing you need to do is find out why, right? Let me find out why. Why is this happening? And of course, on the fire ground, they might not have time for that,
right?
Okay, but in general, if you're in the firehouse or something, hey, this thing came down. Let me call up to the boss. Let me see what the reasons are for this. And then you can even suggest a different path to the boss. Like, hey, I hear what you're saying. What about this thing over here? This might work better for us. Is this a possibility? Right. Advocate for your people. Advocate for yourself. Maybe the boss never thought of it.
Right.
And maybe you have a chance to influence the operation there. Okay. But let's assume the boss says, nope, I want you to stay the course. I want you to do this thing. All right. Now this is an opportunity to display discipline. Okay, now you pivot to your guys. You go, look, guys, look, the boss is making this call. They want us to carry out this task, so we're going to do it. And, I found out why. This is the reason that we're doing it for X, Y, and Z. This is what he wanted. I went with him for an alternative, but he's just choosing to not go with the alternative. So this is what we got to do. So let's just get on board and get this done. Pull your people together. They know you advocated for them. They know that you're not fully on board with it, but they also know that you're not, because how's it going to look if you start?
Yeah, you can't badmouth.
You can't badmouth the boss. You can't undercut the boss because that's not good leadership. And to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower.
Right.
And what do you want people to do when you issue an order? You want them to follow it, right? However, if you're humble, you also welcome feedback. So what I want when I issue something out, if somebody has a question, I want them to ask. And I've also said to people, hey, look, I have a responsibility to make a decision, okay? Your leaders at every level, our leaders in every fire department have a responsibility to make decisions and issue orders. They have that responsibility. We have to carry them out. So, I think that people understand they're not going to agree with everything. But if you can get people on board, explain the why, and just say, look, this is what they want. This is what we're going to do. I think they'll be okay with that.
Yeah.
More or less.
I think making unpopular decisions is easier when it's your decision. Like, so on the fire ground, when you're like, hey, listen, you got to be writ. That sucks, and that people don't like that, but that is what it is. Or like, we have too many guys inside. Just wait a minute or something. But in the firehouse, when it's not your decision, but you have to enforce that unpopular decision, I feel like that's a very tough position for any leader. So I was just curious, kind of your thoughts on that. But I like that.
I mean, it's writ is important. Writ matters.
Right.
You might not think it's fun, but we need it. And it's not about you, and it's not about me. It's about the mission. It's about what we're trying to accomplish, and how we'd be letting our teammates down if we didn't have a RIT team ready to go out front. Like you have your brother and sister firefighters back. If you're complaining about being RIT, how about you show the incident commander how motivated you are and how trustworthy you are, and when he assigns you RIT, you turn to your guys, hey guys, we got the RIT assignment. Let's get it done and get your equipment out there and get it staged and get ready to go and be the best RIT team that you could possibly be. Whatever you're doing, be the best at it.
Yeah.